Hello and welcome to the Yoga Teachers Lab podcast. I'm Vix and I aim to simplify yoga teaching so that you can offer super amazing, inclusive and accessible classes as well as therapeutic ones. We're going to talk about down dog today. We're going to cover the posture, we're going to cover modifications, variations, we're going to cover body types, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we cue it, how we can then adjust it if we choose to. So let's get started. Downward facing dog. Okay, it's probably a good idea for us to talk about the origins of this traditional pose. It's one of those staple poses that we find in, I would say, every class, as long as it's not yin or restorative. So downward facing dog, we've got the hands on the floor and the feet, and we're up in this inverted V, so upside down V shape. We often come into down dog from, gosh, that just drew a blank in my head, from many poses. In the sun salutation, we go from our up dog into the down dog, but we can step back into down dog often from anywhere, from any kind of standing pose, from tabletop. So it really does need breaking down because it comes up a lot. So let's have a look at the hands to start with. The hands in downward facing dog are the foundations at the front of this pose. So we're holding our weight through the hands as well as the balls of the feet or flat feet, depending on which variation. So the hands, first of all, we really want to spread the fingers out a little bit because this actually widens your foundation. So it's good to have a nice wide foundation. Also, when we abduct the fingers like that, if you do that right now yourself, go ahead and open your fingers wide and then notice that your forearm muscles begin to contract a little bit, especially and also in the palm of the hand. All of those intrinsic muscles contract. So we've got a little bit more stability when we actually engage there. So your wrist is really happy in a neutral, and you probably agree that wrists are not super happy just taking body weight all the time. We're kind of designed to walk on our feet now, but with the correct tweaks, we can definitely work on our hands here. So let's give a couple of tips around activating forearm muscles for nice neutral wrists and happy hands. So go ahead and push down into the floor, so creating that flexion at the wrist. This will activate the wrist flexors, which come from the anterior surface of your forearm, and this will stop your body weight from dumping down in and extending the wrist out more. So push away with the fingertips, and this creates stability there. Let's move up the chain a little bit. We've got the elbows. Traditionally, you might hear a few cues here and there about eyes of elbows together. I'm going to say one thing: poo. We can't tell everybody to put their eyes or their elbows together at the same position because every single person has a different body, a different anatomy. The bones are shaped different, everything, their life has been different, their flexibility, their mobility is different. So let's look at the eyes of the elbows and what happens. If you are in your down dog and you start to move and roll the eyes of the elbows, that's the inside of your elbow, the crease. If you roll them externally and internally, what you're actually doing is internally and externally rotating at the shoulder. So in down dog, I would say, I'm always going to say that it's an individual approach to everybody. I think that it's been talked about a lot recently, not giving these really strict one-size-fits-all cues to every single person. But let's have a look at some of the general stuff and see what's going on in your body when you do it. If you go into your down dog and you start to rotate the eyes of the elbows outwards, you're going to start feeling external rotation in your shoulders. This might actually bring your chest forwards. It might then bring your shoulder blades down a little bit together into retraction. It might activate your serratus anterior, that lovely muscle that sits and pulls the scapula actually into protraction, but also a little bit of depression. And it might set your shoulder girdle, which is everything including the arm bone, the collarbone, the shoulder blade, that whole girdle that sits on your rib cage. It might bring it into a nice stable position for you. You might find bending the elbows helps here as well, because bending the elbows kind of unlocks the chain a little bit. You can work out where you want your upper arm bones, and then you can kind of almost scoop those elbows back into that straight position. But do you know what? It's already getting a little bit too technical for my liking. I always tell people to feel it. You know, how are you feeling? So as long as they're actually activating those fingers and they're happy with the position and how it feels in their shoulders. A good reason to tell people to actually externally rotate their shoulders is we can say that a lot of people have internally rotated shoulders. It's kind of a comfy zone when we're sat at a desk. So if we're sat working at a desk, we tend, and this doesn't mean that everybody does, and we're all made differently. So I want to keep going back to that so you get that point. But we tend to sit rather rounded. So I demonstrate this so much, I think I give myself actually I have a posture now because of how much I demonstrate this. But go into that slump position, internally rotate a little bit through the shoulders, and you know that that's a ball and socket joint. So we have the axes going straight up through the humerus bone, and it rotates around in the joint like this. That's there. So I think that it's good to get people to really feel the external rotation because a lot of people need it. A lot of people just need the balance, because if you're sitting all day or for many days in the internal, I'm not saying that there's a perfect posture, I'm just saying balance is good. So we're up on the shoulders, and in the shoulder region in your down dog, some people cue to drop the shoulders away from the ears. What we're actually doing when we drop the shoulders into depression is we're actually locking out the scapula, and we're asking it to lock down onto the rib cage. What this does is it locks it in a position and doesn't let it rotate happily outwards. So when we lift our arm up, let's just say we lift our arm up to reach something from a shelf, we actually get this lovely healthy external rotation at the scapula. So if in a down dog we tell people to really plug their shoulders back down towards the tailbone, we're actually going to stop that free movement of the scapula. So actually it's going to make them possibly reach a little bit of compression, which whilst it isn't bad, it may not free their shoulder for exploration purposes to find out what works best for them. So try unplugging the shoulders, externally rotate, and if you take your, take your left hand and take it into the armpit, slide it down to the side of your ribs, find the edge of your scapula, your right arm is in the air. Under there, where your fingertips are, that is the serratus anterior, which locks or slides that scapula into its protracted or separated position to lock. Well, in certain circumstances, it locks or just stabilizes out the shoulder, like in a plank or a push-up. So that is good to feel in down dog, is really feeling like a combination of internal, external, nice and strong. Everybody has a different level of mobility and flexibility at their shoulders. Me, for example, I am naturally very hypermobile, which would make you think that I'd have supermobile arms and shoulders, but actually my thoracic or upper back is very stiff because of the hypermobility. So for me to raise my arm above my head is very difficult. So that brings me to the next point, which is the thoracic spine in your down dog. So we're talking about the neck and the upper back. The neck and the upper back, the neck is very neutral because we're kind of letting the head go down. The gaze traditionally was at the thighs or to the feet. So the head shouldn't be lifting back too much or looking down too much. The thoracic spine is where we can start to make some magic happen. If we free our thoracic spine, which is naturally curved in that kyphosis, that rounded position, if we can free it up a little bit, if we've worked our thoracic spine using some extension or arching back and some rotation, we can really get some lovely movement for the shoulder as well. So for every, say, degree that we want to lift our arm in the air, feel it in yourself. There's about half a degree. I'm just kind of adding numbers to give you context. I'm not 100% sure if that is 100% accurate, but I'm remembering that from uni. But every degree or every time you want to lift the arm up, we have to extend in the thoracics. And if your thoracics are really stiff, what's going to happen is it's going to pass it down the chain to the lumbar spine. You're just going to start arching from the lumbars. I can feel that straight away. So for me, I'm going to want to work on my thoracic spine to get a really deep, wrong, I should never say deep. I'm against the word deep at the moment, sorry about that. But yeah, if I want to move further into my shoulder flexion, I will work on my extension in the thoracic spine. So that's because for every degree that I lift that arm up, and now we look at that as a down dog, where the arm is in exactly the same position above our head, but just the head is down to the floor, we need extension in the thoracic spine. So thoracic spine needs to be mobile and moving well into extension. The lumbar spine, well, the lumbar spine here, we can really attach and clump it in with the pelvic tilts. So when we go into down dog, we often hear, you know, send the tailbone high, send the tailbone up, tip the pelvis forward. So what you're trying to do there is you're trying to really lengthen and elongate the spine. So it's a little bit of a natural kind of lordosis or arch in the lumbar spine, and lifting the tailbone or anteriorly tilting the pelvis. If you do that with me now, what that means is, if you're sitting, is drop the belly forwards, arch your low back. Imagine there's a bowl of water in your pelvis. You tip it forwards to get your anterior or forward pelvic tilt. So we want to get that going in the down dog. And that's why, and the reason I clump the pelvis with the lumbar spine is because the hamstrings, which are my next point, so the muscle groups and the softer tissues that we're actually lengthening or needing to work into a lengthened position here, are attached to the pelvis, which is attached to the low back. So the more you send that tailbone up in the air, the more you're going to feel a pull on the back of your sit bones, where the hamstrings start, and all the way down to the back of the knee where they finish. So it's important to note that not everybody will be able to do that. So there's a great thing we can do in yoga in many poses, whether it's standing, seated, or down dog, and that is to unlock the chain. So if somebody is in their down dog and they've done all the bits with the shoulders, and you kind of get them feeling pretty good there, and they're feeling like they're strengthening and lengthening all at the same time and getting a good amount of work done in the shoulders, but they're trying to get that tailbone high in the air, and all they're feeling is like a burning sensation in the back of their leg, they probably could benefit from bending the knees. Let's unlock the chain, let's bend the knees. So bending the knees will unlock that posterior chain or back of the body chain, which connects a lot of muscles and fascia all the way up from, say, the sole of the foot all the way to the top of the head. So the same goes for the front of the body, the same goes for the sides, and then there's the spiral ones, all that stuff. Different podcast episode. So bend the knees. And of course, with the knees bent, it's going to be a little difficult to keep the feet flat on the floor, but that is my next point. Don't put the feet flat on the floor. If you prioritize the heels going down over everything else, you're ignoring the fingers, elbows, shoulders, thoracics, lumbars, pelvis, hamstrings, knees, and you're going, I just have to get the feet down because that's what they told me. So don't bother with that. Down dog is a whole body thing, and it ain't a rest. It is not a rest. Why do we call it a rest? It's not a rest. So the heels can come down if the posterior chain, i.e. the Achilles tendon, the calf and the deeper calf muscles, hamstrings, lower back, and all of those tissues are really happy to be in that lengthened state. If we compare the down dog to a seated position and we put the posterior chain in the same position, it would be like sitting and folding forwards with a straight back with arms up in the air. So you would still feel that stretch along the hamstrings, you'd feel it. So it's exactly the same when we're in down dog. So I tiptoe, and I think if you have flexibility, it doesn't mean you have to use it. For me, I much prefer promoting strength in my posterior chain. So I might actually dig down into the floor in my down dog, therefore resisting the legs lifting up in the air, therefore charging up into a contraction, all of the muscles at the back of my legs, because I want to warm them up, I want to make them work. I don't actually want to continuously just stretch my hamstrings, which is what seems to happen in so many yoga practices. I just don't need it. I was born with the ability to totally like fold down and touch my knee, and it hasn't given me anything other than discomfort and pain in my late 30s. Separate podcast again, but I'll get to it, I promise. So down dog, it's individual. The last thing I want to say about kind of alignment and movements and modifications is You've got the heels lifted, we've got the knees bending, you can bend the elbows, you can get the arms wider. Forgot to mention that one. Arms wide. Some people don't have, for some, it could be the reason of muscles, it could be body mass, it can be a number of things. We don't have to know every single reason back to front, but we want to get them into a position where they feel they can manage it, where they've got some muscles activating. So take the hands wider if you need. We can turn the fingers slightly in if you need. There's a lot of alignment which will focus on fingers forward, 45 degrees. I'd say chuck all of that out the window if you want to teach real bodies. It's a guide, and I guess I can see and I respect why it was like that. But there is definitely a way for us to explore teaching without the need to be super strict on the angles and positions of everything. You should be feeling a really nice mix of strength and stretch and lengthening going on in both sides of your both bottom half and top half of your body right now. If you want to say feel a little bit more in from the hips down, you want to work a little bit, maybe you're a runner or something like that, maybe try slowly with exhaling, dropping those heels to lengthen a little bit, stretch that hip all the way down to the heel. And maybe with the knees bending, is the opposite. We're going to start to deepen a little bit into the shoulders. So if you try bending your knees, you can actually bring the chest through the two arms a little bit, a couple of inches or centimeters, whatever it is, to deepen a little bit if you want to really open your shoulders. So for me, for example, I'm working on my thoracic spine more than my hamstrings any day of the week. I take my arms a little wider, I practice lifting chest forward, bending my knees, and now I'm getting a beautiful extension in my thoracic spine, which I know that I really need. So telling people that there's a little bit going on top half and bottom half in this pose, and that they can choose a little bit to feel what they want to feel there. Giving some suggestions of what they might be feeling or working on. You could ask them to corkscrew into the floor to activate the external rotators of the shoulder again. That's going to make this whole girdle start to solidify itself in a nice position on the shoulder. You can get people to heel raise and down to give them some options with lengthening and strengthening through the lower leg, for example. It's just endless. But just telling everyone to be exactly the same distance with the hands and feet, hands in line with the shoulders, feet underneath the, in line with the hips and all of that stuff, or feet together, even worse, is not going to be accessible for everybody. And it's actually going to mean that they really miss out a little bit on some of the really amazing benefits that we can get from individualizing each pose. Adjusting. If you're new to adjusting, if you're new to assisting, and I'm going to say assisting and adjusting is like an umbrella term, like that's just, they're both similar. You could argue that adjusting is more hands-on and assisting would be more like, oh, just lift your arm, that's it, yep. So assisting and adjusting for down dog, definitely approach with care, because now that you know that they might be like this because they're really working on, say, their body size or something is, in the way, and they're making space for it, we can't then go and say, come on, move your hands back in the middle. So with that in mind, we can maybe go and put our hand on their hand and help them corkscrew. We could show them the direction. We could ground if their hands are popping up a little bit, although some people's hands pop up because of their osteology, because of the way their skeleton's designed. Some people can't fully flatten and extend their wrists. So yeah, I'm sorry if this all makes you feel even more afraid to do anything. I think it's quite brave to dive into actually getting to know the whole body and all of the bodies in the world and how different they are, so that we can really realize how important it is to individualize each and every assist and adjustment. You might see that someone looks really comfortable, and maybe you know that person, you know that they don't have any issues in their down dog. You may then go around to the sacrum, and you might ground the skin and the fascia on the sacrum up towards the ceiling, and that might be a 2 or 3 out of 10 effort, meaning 9, 10 is like your strongest push, and a 1 or a 2 or a 3 is like a really gentle push. It doesn't mean it's not confident push, or a confident touch. It might just be that the heel of your hand with your fingers far, far away from their buttock flesh going up, so straight up to the ceiling. Their buttock flesh is kind of over there. You're just grounding through the low back sacrum, and you're sliding the hand towards the ceiling in a way just to lengthen a little bit through the low back tissues, which might just feel like a nice assist. It will just be like a nice therapeutic assist. And then the heel of your hand placed on there, on the low back, the sacrum, so lower than that, may also give them a tiny, very gentle guide to lengthen a little bit through the back of the legs. And again, only if you feel like that's actually relevant to that person. I wouldn't like it, I really wouldn't like it if someone came and just pushed my sacrum so hard that my heels touch the floor. They will touch the floor, but I don't like it because I'm trying to keep myself at 80% on purpose. So it's a lot to think about, isn't it? If you think about, oh, okay, maybe the people I have adjusted in the past actually wanted to be where they were at. So I really think that it's a really delicate situation, and it involves a lot of communication. And you probably work with a lot of people every week, so you can really have a chat with them and get to know them. And what an amazing way to deepen your knowledge of your students' bodies and practice by openly asking them, so in your down dog, what are you feeling? And don't be afraid to drop to the floor, drop the knees down and take a little rest and have a little chat mid-class. Not every single week, but this is a huge topic, yoga. It's like, wow, it's like, it's not just quick, come in at 5, get them moving, don't stop till 6, let them out, let them go home. Yes, fine. If that's the kind of class you teach, maybe most of the time it's like that. But it's okay to drop the knees and come up and be like, I'm really curious how you're all feeling in your down dog. And you know, Elaine over there loves to talk, definitely in front of the people. Yep, Elaine, how's yours? Blah, blah, blah. And you can have a little chat, get to know them, or maybe just outside the class, after or before class. So, a little recap. Downward facing dog is not a rest. You have 2 lots of foundations, the hands and the feet. There are no set rules on the position of the hands and the feet that we should be making people do. We should be helping people to feel that they're getting a good amount of work out of their pose. They might be there just to come and breathe today, in which case they might just bend the knees a little bit. They may not even try to get the heels down, and they're just 50% pressing the fingers and just enjoying a little bit of this, that, and the other. Or maybe they're there to really work and they really want to strengthen, open their chest. You know, they're working on getting that thoracic spine more mobile. Then they may choose to corkscrew a little bit more, bend the elbows, get them wide, recruit other muscles. The spine and the pelvis, they work together. They don't need to be in any specific position. We don't have to correct every single person that doesn't look to the standard that you think it might be, but asking people to feel, what are you feeling? Like, how much weight do you feel is going forward into the hands versus the feet? Bend the knees to draw the chest back and increase the shoulder opener. Straighten the knees to lengthen the posterior chain from the hips down mostly. Modify and make variations, and don't stick to that traditional alignment if it doesn't suit your student. It's been a pleasure recording this podcast entry. It's also a YouTube video, and I really look forward to seeing you soon. Have a lovely day. Thank you.